Welcome to the first ever episode of Heritage Cooking. I am joined by my wonderful mother, Deb Weaver, and we are going to take you through a recipe, an old family recipe, and just kind of see conceptually if this show sticks, if there's any interest for it. But essentially, right off the top, what we're going to do is we'll go through the recipe. We'll show the full ingredients list, everything you need, so you can hit pause and go get all that stuff, and then come back, and we'll talk through what the recipe is and who it came from, how to make it, and then we'll do a little discussion on the back end, and we'll overlay our beautiful speaking faces with pictures and video of the prep of that food. The intention is really not to do like a cooking show, but more a discussion about the recipe. So we won't break it down and focus in real tight on like, now you whip the Milnot for 30 minutes. But we'll say that, we'll show that, but it'll be more focused on the discussion around it.
Right. Excellent.
You have anything you want to add there?
I'm really excited about this because family recipes are carried on by generations, but they're not always what they were. And I think that's what makes them heritage, is that they get passed on, they get used, they get re-envisioned, they get remade with current recipe ingredients. And that's the beauty of it, I think. And so I like to see these old experiences of food, family experiences of food being brought forward into new generations. So, and I love the fact that you love to cook, so that's cool.
Yeah, this one was less successful for me, it seemed, and then it really set and was just fine. So I'm not sure, but we'll get into all that. So this recipe is cheesecake.
Yes. Now, if you ask your dad, he would say it's not really cheesecake because I didn't know that this wasn't cheesecake until after your dad and I were together. So I was in my late 20s when we went to a restaurant and I said, "Oh, cheesecake. I'd love to have cheesecake." And it came. And it was this big white thing. And I'm like, "That's not cheesecake." And Dad said, "Yeah, that's cheesecake." And there was my mind blown and my reality completely readjusted, because that's not cheesecake as I had ever known it, the way my mom made it.
So you'll see it on the screen right now, a picture of this quote unquote cheesecake. And you might be thinking very much the same thing. What the hell is this? So, Mom, why don't you tell us a little bit about the history of this recipe?
Well, my mom always made this recipe. In fact, she made it when you were born. It was, the family event cake that she always made, and that's all we've ever known. And it was this glorious, squishy, poofy pink thing with graham cracker bottom and graham cracker on the top, and that's all I ever knew is cheesecake. When I got the recipe from my mom, she gave me the recipe, but I never really made it with her. And then she died. And as a way of honoring her, I wanted to make the recipe for us. And I failed miserably because there were all kinds of things that she didn't tell me about the recipe. So I called my only living aunt, my mom's sister, and said, "Hey, do you know about the cheesecake recipe?" And she said, "Oh, yeah, that was my mom's recipe." And I said, "That's my mom's recipe." And she said, "Well, Grandma made it first." I said she did. And apparently, Grandma used to make it for the restaurant that my mom worked at in Deerfield, Illinois. It was called Phil Johnson's Restaurant. It was started in 1928 as a roadhouse diner kind of a place. My mom started working there when she was 15 years old. And in and out, but basically she spent 50 years there, as did many of her family members, because it was very close to her home. Phil Johnson's was obviously started by a guy named Phil Johnson, and then his son Art took it over, and then his son Phil took it over. I used to babysit for them. How scary is that? But they used to be known for their roasted chicken. They had a big brick roaster in the backyard that had all the chickens rotisserie, and they had a big pond back there with fish and stuff. And they were famous for the prime rib. My mom was a waitress. So she used to bring home the bones from the prime rib because, you know, why not? And feed my kids. And it was wonderful until the restaurant decided that they could actually make a buck out of it. And then they decided to start selling the ribs. In any case, apparently it was offered there at the restaurant. And one of the reasons I think it probably was because Jello desserts in the 60s was kind of the thing. Jello was a thing for entertaining homes back in those days, in the 50s and 60s. And so I think that the family restaurant atmosphere of the restaurant, but it also was kind of upscale, different. I can imagine why they did it. So that's kind of the history of where the recipe has been around.
So again, you can see it on your screen here, but raspberry Jello, part of this cheesecake recipe.
Right, pink, so, very pink, and we've tried other flavors, and it's just not the same.
And like you said, Jello was kind of a big deal.
It was, you know, gelatin was made out of the bones and the fibers of animals, and so it's been around forever and ever. But it kind of became a thing in World War I. When people would want to upscale their meals. And gelatin in the 15th century was like a really ritzy thing to do. But then they started being able to manufacture it, obviously, in a bigger way, in a commercial way. And Jello became a big deal. And a third of the recipes between the 1930s and the 1950s were actually Jello recipes. Jello salads, and I think they're called aspics, where you put stuff in the Jello. Like if you've ever had a Jello mold that has, okay, I'm grossed out by this, but like vegetables floating in it. There's just, to me, and well, back in the day, Jello actually made vegetable tasting Jello. Right? Right? Because it was this whole like savory thing that you could use it for salads, and I'm sorry, that's just gross.
That's too much.
Yeah, too much, way too much. But it was marketed to busy 50s and 60s housewives as a fast, easy, elegant dessert, and so Jello kind of became a thing.
So one other thing I wanted to call out here. Depending on where you're joining us from, it might be difficult to impossible to find Milnot.
Yes.
Which is a crucial ingredient for this recipe. You can get away with not using it, but the taste just isn't quite right.
Yeah, it isn't even just the taste, it's the volume. Milnot is evaporated milk. But what makes it different, or what made it different, it's not produced anymore, is it was emulsified with soy oil, as opposed to other evaporated milks that had buttermilk in them. And so the soy, when you whip it, the oil holds the air better than other types of fats. So the volume on the cheesecake would get thick and stay like that. And you'd get a lot of air in there so that when you bit into it, you'd get this whoosh kind of sensation, which is the best part of the cheesecake, honestly, is that whoosh.
So that's something we'll do on this show is give you some different options, give you kind of the behind the scenes, because what we want to do is present these recipes as is, the way they've been transmitted. And I'll put them up side by side right now, but there's all these other process steps that are not part of the main recipe. And these are the things that kind of get lost to time. And you know, if the person who gave you the recipe passes away, you might never figure this stuff out.
Right.
I know for me, you had sent me the recipe, and then you had sent the process notes in a different document. And I'm working from my phone to begin with and going back and forth, and like, God, like I almost need to write it all out so that I can understand what the hell I'm doing, because following the recipe top to bottom would not have gotten me to where I needed to be.
Well, and honestly, that's part of the reason why I did it that way, because that is the reality. If I was dead and you found this recipe and you say, hey, I want to make this, this is the struggle you'd come up with, which, to be honest, there were things my mom didn't tell me either about this recipe, so that I've learned actually in making it what needed to happen. So yeah, that's exactly true. And if you look at recipes nowadays in the internet, you go on any site, right? They're very specific. Step 1, exactly what you need to do. Step 2, well, recipes in the 50s weren't like that. I have a box of recipes from my grandmother that don't hardly even have quantities, you know, measurements. They're just kind of like this and that, right? Like old great grandma's like, well, you just put in a fling of that and a little bit of pinch of that, and it's good. Well, it doesn't translate to the future though that way.
So I'll tell you, I have rewritten my version of this recipe with all the process steps in it.
Excellent, excellent. So then here's something that we do too, is we have this family cookbook. So it's a shared digital document that has all of our old family recipes in it. And the beauty of that is now you can go in and you can revise it to your experience of the recipe, because it's not going to be for me, you know, I mean, in the future, it's going to be for your kids or your grandkids or, you know, whatever. So that's good that you've done that.
Well, it needs to be workable too. I know with the Milnot specifically, there aren't a whole lot of references to Milnot on the internet. It's not a thing anymore. Like you said, they went under, diversified, whatever the hell happened to the company, that it's not a thing, and you can't find it, and you can't research it, and there's really not a direct replacement for it.
No. Well, they got bought out by Smucker's at one point, and then Smucker's sold them, and then they went out of business in 2018. So I actually found and paid dearly on Amazon for several cans of Milnot. Now, how good they are, what their date is, you know, like expiration date, I don't know. I haven't tried them yet, but yeah, I've never done it with Milnot, so it'll be very interesting now to try it with Milnot and see whether it works.
So I used evaporated milk in my recipe. I believe it was carnation, and it's a close approximation, as you said. As you whip up the mixture, the idea is to add all that air to it, and it's close. It's close.
Well, I even wonder, and here's where the science geek in me gets going about recipes, is to know something like how this soy oil in the Milnot is what helped that evaporated milk to hold its volume, and makes me wonder whether, if we did a side-by-side comparison of different kinds of evaporated milk that are on the market now, what the differences might be. You know, looking at the ingredient list, you know, carrageenan, is that word? I think that has a lot of thickening and stabilizing properties. But then I wonder if there's other, you know, maybe somebody's got canola oil in their evaporated milk. Who knows? It just might be interesting if this is a recipe that you really wanted to replicate as best you could, to be able to, you know, pick it up and look at those different variables and see if you can, you know, make it work.
The other thing that tripped me up was the Jello. I actually had to throw away the box because you're not supposed to make it the way the box says. And I have the box right there. It's the way I make. I don't make pudding, but like I make pudding, not Jello, and I have the thing right next to the bowl because I'm thinking about 1,000 other things and I will mess it up. And I was referencing the Jello box, right? It's a pretty simple set of instructions, but it's very much not what this recipe calls for.
Right.
And it was a lot. And then I ran out of bowls because I'm just trying to like figure out where I can cut corners because I'm lazy, and
Right.
that was a mistake. But overall, it went pretty smoothly. I obviously used the big mixer, and
Did you use a stand mixer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, beat the hell out of it. We'll show some side by sides of the texture of mine and yours, but yeah, I just let that thing go for a while.
Yeah, I tried to do it. I live off grid, and so my electricity is very dear to me. And so I tried to make it a few years ago just using a whisk, a hand whisk. That didn't work. Not even close. You can whip probably angel food cake egg whites with a whisker, but not this recipe. So I actually, broke down and got myself a hand mixer, and it still could have been. I could have whipped it much longer.
I know one thing that would have tripped me up if we hadn't talked about it in advance is the cold bowls and the cold beater. Because as you can see here, it is the last instruction in this recipe. It does not call for ice cold anything until the last line, halfway through the last sentence. And if I had just been following the recipe, I would have had to stop and stick everything in the freezer.
And that's because that was not in my mother's recipe. That's something that I learned. Cooks will tell you that if you're trying to whip, like whipped cream, that you want everything to be really cold for just that reason, is that it has a chance to fluff before it starts to break down. And I tried it, and that did make a difference, but my mom never told me that, and it wasn't on her written recipe. So that's why it was at the bottom of the list.
That's fair.
But I guess there you go, one of those ingredient lists too, like what do you need for this recipe? Like the 4-5 bowls, whatever it takes, and all of that would be good.
Yeah, but most recipes don't call for pots or pans or whisks. You just you get to that step and you go for it. It's just the only time it matters is if you have to do some sort of prep work to your equipment.
Right. Would you say, I'm curious, would you say that this recipe was difficult?
I wouldn't say difficult. I think I'd say complex. Just because you're doing so many different things and then combining them together. So not a difficult recipe, but not one that you'd want to undertake like as you're preparing dinner. It's something you have to do standalone. You can't be doing other things. It takes a dedicated chef.
Yes, especially once you start to get those things whipped up, because you don't want them to lose their volume, and the weight of the liquid will, condense them. So yes, absolutely.
But I mean, pretty straightforward, top to bottom. It's a easy recipe to do.
I'm curious what kind of memories you have about this recipe.
Very little. I was thinking about it as I was making it, and I think most of mine are borrowed memories from you. You talking about it. I don't remember Nana making this ever.
Really? Do you remember the taste of it? So when you made it,
the texture.
How did you know if you were on? It was the texture.
The texture. But I don't like remember seeing it on the counter or having a plate of it or anything.
Oh.
So I think a lot of that for me is borrowed from you, but the texture of it, that's how I knew I was close, because nothing tastes like weird Jello cheesecake. It's just the way it sits in your mouth is very unique. But I don't think I have any memories of my own outside of conversations you and I have had.
Interesting. Well, but the taste, the texture is a memory. It's just a different kind of memory. And probably because when Nana was making them for you, you were young. And, children remember things like textures and smells and feelings, sensory stuff, more than they remember the intellectual linear experience of whatever it was. That's the way children remember things, is in their senses. So it's good that you remember at least that part.
I need to make it again. I want to try to get Milnot. There's supposedly a place by me where we can do that. And I want to give it to the same sample group that tried it the first time because it was not a hit.
Oh,
it was not a hit.
Oh, see, there you go. Stake through my heart.
And like for me, it tasted right, and I ate a whole pan of it myself because no one else wanted any.
Oh,
but
wow.
yeah, small sample. But yeah, it was not a hit. So I want to try it again with the Milnot and try to force it on the same people and see what it is. But it is a very distinct texture and is very much hard to describe and is very much not like any other dessert.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't mentally prep someone, and they're coming into trying it for the first time with all these preconceived notions.
Yes.
And yeah, it did not hit.
What I noticed in mine, because the volume was lower than it was the way I knew it, was that the raspberry. Now this also could be the Jello formulation also, but the raspberry's taste was. What would the word be? Just this side of bitter.
Okay.
You know, because it is Jello, they have you put in X amount of water, which would dilute the taste of the Jello, right? Well, with this recipe, you're using less water. And I wonder if maybe the Jello formulation has changed so that the raspberry taste needs that dilution, or if it was because there wasn't enough volume, and so I'm getting more bite, more raspberry bite in every bite, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's I don't know. I mean, I suppose if I could find a box of Jello that was 50 years old, I could try it. It would probably still be just fine. It's just sugar, and it would be interesting. I know you have a friend that does flavorings and chemical flavorings and stuff like that. It would be interesting to just see if those kinds of flavorings are stable for 50 years.
Yeah. It wouldn't shock me.
I can't imagine why it wouldn't be. It's really just sugar. That's an important thing too that isn't in the recipe, that it's not sugar-free. You can't use the sugar-free Jello to do this recipe. You have to use regular full sugar Jello.
Why would anyone buy sugar-free Jello?
I don't know. It's ridiculous. Frankly, why would anyone buy Jello? I don't think
that's fair.
Jello. Did I ever serve you Jello as a kid? I don't think
so. And I can't remember the last time. Oh, never mind. Jello shots.
Yeah, that's different though. That's a whole different beast. But I never certainly, those. I'm sorry, I just can't do the Jello with like the grapes in it and pieces of pineapple and no.
Like a salad loaf. No.
Right. Well, my grandma, she was a caterer, and she would put, she would make these Jello aspics and then cut them in pieces and put them on a slice of lettuce on a plate, and it was beautiful to look at. But who would eat it? Oh no.
60s housewives.
Right. I guess. Yeah.
All right. Well, did you have anything else on the cheesecake here?
Apart from the process, you mean? No, I think that's about the history of it.
All right. So you can see the recipe there on the side of the screen. That is the way the recipe is written. That's the way it's presented. However, those hidden secret process steps that aren't listed out here, those are the things that'll really trip you up. So within the structure of this recipe, what are the other things we have to do in here, Ma?
Well, to purchase the graham crackers, it really is much easier to purchase them already crushed. Now, I know you actually did the crushing.
I beat my hands up real bad. Tore through a whole bag of a Ziploc bag. Ripped through. It got all over the counter.
Right. Well, if I can find crushed graham crackers here in my rural little nowhereville, you could probably find it too. But that's much easier to purchase that. Another thing is the butter. Everything now seems to be made with unsalted butter. This recipe clearly was made, a long time ago, and it would have been using salted butter. To stay true to its form, I would use the salted butter, personally. There's also something here about the sizes that is kind of ambiguous. One large package of raspberry Jello. Well, when you're doing an old recipe, large from the 1950s is not, let's supersize it, not necessarily the large of today. Luckily in Jello, there still are just the 2 sizes, but I don't know what the ounces are. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I didn't even look.
Right, I think it's 6 ounces maybe for the large. I'm not sure. Same thing with the cream cheese. 1 large cream cheese. Well, what does that mean? Luckily, those are still pretty standard too.
Yeah, I just assumed it was a brick.
Right. Lemon juice, it doesn't say can't, bottled or fresh. I am sure my mother never juiced lemons, so I'm sure that it was just bottled. And then, of course, there's the infamous Milnot. So that's the way the recipe calls, is for the Milnot. And that's, if you want it genuine, that's what you would use, and substitute as you will. There's the whole prep part that you mentioned about making sure you have all of the bowls ready, and you have all of the utensils cold if they need to be cold. And that's something that the recipe doesn't ask for at all. And so, I don't know, you want to explain how you managed through it without having that information?
Well, you had beaten into my head that the beaters in the bowl had to be cold. So I did have that. I did have them cold. Actually 2 days in advance, because I wasn't sure when I was going to cook. So I just stuck them in the freezer and left them there.
Yeah.
I did attempt to soften the cream cheese. However, if you've been by Club 602, you know that in February the inside temperature is about 50 degrees, and the cream cheese was not horribly soft. That was a fight. I think I got a video of that in the mixing bowl, and it was a fight. The Jello,
you can microwave cream cheese to soften it.
That's cheating.
Okay, well, I know I don't have a microwave, so it doesn't work for me either. But that is something that in a current recipe it might say, see cook's notes, microwave for 15 seconds, or I don't even know how long it would take.
No, we use our microwave to store leftovers, not to actually cook.
That's true.
The other one that kind of tripped me up was just the time on the Jello. How long it would take to actually beat all that air into the Jello as it's set.
Well, it doesn't say that either in the recipe, does it? To continually go back to that Jello and beat it as it's beginning to set up.
Yeah, it says beat Jello until smooth.
Right. So now
yeah.
I've made it where I've let it set too long, and then it's chunky, and what you get is chunks of Jello in the final product, which is not what you want. So it's a matter of continually, like how often did you beat on it?
Every 10 minutes?
Yeah, I was going to say about 15 minutes. And my house is also cool like yours, so it would set up faster in a house at 50 than it would at a house at 75, or in the summer at 90, right?
Yeah, I think that was the last thing that really threw me a bit. The crust didn't seem right to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was too much butter or not enough butter, but the crust itself just didn't work. It was very, very tough to mix, because there's not any liquid to it. So it was tough to mix. And then when I had it pressed into the form, it just didn't look right visually.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually really enjoyed it because it was in there pretty thick. So I had.
Well, now you used a different size pan, right?
Yes, I did. Your recipe calls for a 12 and a half by 10 by 2, and I used an 8 by 8.
Wow. So it would have been much thicker, the crust.
Yeah, and it was good. It was really good like that. Like day 5 as a leftover out of the fridge, it was a little tougher to punch through that much crust. But when it was fresh and set, it was really, really good.
Well, here's something also, the recipe calls for what, 45 crackers or something like that. Well, what brand and what size cracker? It's a little ambiguous because in the old days, there really wasn't a lot of choices of what kinds of graham crackers to buy. And of course, now there's thousands of different kinds of graham crackers. Again, why it makes more sense to use the cup version. But also in this recipe, I would use more butter. I thought the crust was too loose, mine was too loose. It didn't firm up enough. Now, did you press it into the pan? And how did you do that?
With my hands.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I was using a spoon and I got frustrated with it. So I switched to just my hands.
Well, the heat from your hands probably was good because it would kind of keep that butter moist enough to, so.
I will say like a standard, like we're going to make some more box of graham crackers does not have 42 graham crackers in it.
See?
That was a pain.
How many does it have?
40. 40. It was 2 stacks of 20. I had a Nabisco or something. It was like 2 stacks of 20.
Okay.
So I
those ways
I
that
had
those
more
recipes don't translate necessarily to current availability.
Yeah. The other thing, I was just reading back through this, trying to make sure I don't miss anything. And the fridge and freezer combo.
Uh-huh.
The recipe, your added line, says explicitly put in freezer for 1 hour, then move to refrigerator.
Yes.
But the thing that was missing was when can you serve it? When is it ready?
Uh-huh. Yes.
So I had made it mid-afternoon. So by the time we were through some of the late basketball games, I just took it out and we ate it. But that was how long does it need to be in there for?
Yep, and that's something I actually missed even this time when I made it because I froze it and then took it out and thought, okay, well, refrigeration is just for storage, right? And I cut a piece. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. There was something not right about it. But after I had put it in the refrigerator like the next day and cut out a piece, it was much better.
Oh.
So you're right. There's a piece in there that says it needs to refrigerate overnight before serving or something like that.
Yeah.
Yep. Did you get the whole, like, which things are you whipping and when do you put them together and did you whip them together? Because it says in here, Jello cheese mixture and mix thoroughly. Did you fold it in? Did you beat it in? Did you mix it with the spoon? How did you combine the Milnot with?
I dumped it all in the mixing bowl.
Okay.
And then, so I know I'll put the video up now. I got some cool video of it blending to pink.
Yeah. But you use the mixer.
Yeah, I dumped it right in the mixer.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, once I had everything done, it combined down into the mixer.
Interesting. Okay. And I don't see, and I don't know. I've never done that because I don't know. I didn't know I was supposed to or whatever. And yours had much better volume than mine. So maybe actually beating that last combination is important.
Yeah, I figured I haven't used that mixer in 6 years, so I figured it might as well get some use.
Has it been cleaned yet?
Yeah, it was cleaned immediately.
Okay. Well, I've been to Club 602, okay?
Immaculately kept.
Yes, always.
All right. So that is the cheesecake recipe.
Fun. It was fun. It was fun to share
good.
with you.
We'll have to make another pass at it and try some of the things we called out there. One other thing I want to try down the road is making it cheater mode with a graham cracker crust, a pre-made graham cracker crust.
Right. With this volume of cheesecake, you'd probably need to have 4, I would guess.
That's a lot.
And if your friends won't eat it, you have a big problem.
Yes, absolutely.
The problem with a ready-made crust like that is they're not very deep. Mm-hmm. And part of this deal with this recipe, this product, is the depth. Now, when my mom made it, what is that?
It is literally impossible to tell on webcam. I don't know.
I would say when my mom made it, it was it was probably 3 inches high, easily, maybe 4. That's how much volume there was, to it when she made it. And so my concern would be using those ready-made pie crusts is that it would never be able to fit. It would never,
Yeah.
the ratio would be all wrong. You couldn't get the volume. So, well.
So that's our pilot episode of Heritage Cooking. Drop us a note. Let us know what you liked or didn't like. Obviously, this is a bit of a departure from some of the other shows we're running right now. But hey, variety is the spice of life.
Absolutely.
So, we'll work on branding and a catchphrase and all of that kind of stuff. But we wanted to get one out, even if it was a little rough, and just kind of see where it goes.
Fun.
So thanks for joining us, and we'll throw something up on Instagram. Maybe we'll let somebody else pick the type of next recipe we go for.
Oh, excellent. Okay. All right.
All right. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye.